All right, my friends. Hello. Welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers. We've got a very special episode of this show today because we've got Viva Frei, who's going to be joining us, who is somebody who is in the legal space. We've had a lot of conversations recently about Kyle Rittenhouse. And of course, he's somebody who has some astute observations. And so we're going to bring him in. Quick show note that we're gonna do an interview here. This is a little bit different than what we normally do at this time. So we're going to do an interview here with Viva, and then we're going to break. It is Tuesday. I've got my men's group, and so we're going to break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do a full deep dive on Kyle Rittenhouse because I've got a lot of clips from everything that went on today. And so we're going to break this up sort of into a mega Tuesday night of Kyle Rittenhouse because, of course, today the state has rested. The prosecution has stopped presenting their evidence. And so we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to start off with a lovely debrief here for my good friend Viva. Welcome, Viva.
Robert, how goes the battle?
Good, my friend. And thank you so much for accommodating my technical problems here at the beginning. But it gave me a minute to admire the Freedom Fro.
I had to back my camera up. Well, actually, no, I had to reframe the camera because it's starting to hit the top part of the camera. I don't know when I'm going to have to cut it. My parents are on my back about it. My wife is sort of on my back, but more so about the beard. I said I'll cut it when we have freedom in Canada, but then I might be, it might be ponytail time by that time.
Well, I want to get into that a little bit today. So I know we've got about an hour together, and you've done a lot. I mean, the last time we spoke, I think it was back when you and Barnes had me on for Sidebar, and that was, I think, back during some of the Chauvin era. And so we've had a little bit of a criminal law hiatus to some degree, and then now we've got just a bunch of stuff going on. We've got Rittenhouse, we've got Arbery, we've got Ghislaine Maxwell's coming up. It's kind of been a free for all. Where have your eyeballs been?
So, I mean, I have never been able to, I didn't like the Ahmaud Arbery case for a number of reasons. It upset me to view that case. Not that the Rittenhouse doesn't upset me as much. The facts are just a little bit more palatable in the Rittenhouse case. And it certainly seems to be, say, much more of a landmark issue. That might not be the right word, but really a fundamental issue for the United States in terms of self-defense that I don't think the same questions necessarily come up in Ahmaud Arbery. So I've been following that. And what's magnificent to see in all of this is this ecosystem that is being created in real time, where we're watching it with Ricada. We're watching a world wake up to live streaming of trials, live streaming lawyer panels reacting in real time, not just, playing it through so people can get lost and fall asleep. And it's crazy. You see Ricada go from 6,000 live to 37,000 live.
I know. I know.
In real time, and it's a magnificent to watch, but it's creating these mini ecosystems. People who are interested in Ahmaud Arbery can go watch, Joe Neerman, Nate Brody's covering it. My interest lies in Don Lemon's upcoming trouble. Upcoming trouble is a Freudian slip. Upcoming trial. If they're live streaming that, I'm going to be doing that. My wife will have to take the kids to and from school. I'll be doing that day in and day out.
I love it. Can you give us a quick and dirty on that one? What's the snapshot on that case? Because I'm not even familiar with this.
So it's Don Lemon is accused of sexual, call it assault, battery. In that plaintiff is Dustin Heinz, who was a bartender at I forget, it's an uppity area in New York State. Someone in the chat will know right offhand. I've forgotten it. Bottom line, Don Lemon comes in for a drink and he offers to buy Lemon a lemon drop, which I didn't know what it meant at the time. And now it seems to have some urban dictionary definitions.
Okay.
And Don Lemon didn't like it. And allegedly later on in the evening, Don Lemon goes up to this guy, Dustin Heinz, allegedly puts his hand between his legs, rubs his genitals vigorously, then sticks his fingers in the guy's nose and says, "Do you like PUSSY or DICK?" And the guy allegedly, Dustin Heinz, got seriously perturbed by this, went into a depression, had suicidal ideations, all these things, and is suing for damages. And apparently Don Lemon does not necessarily have the cleanest of all behavioral histories. So it's going to be an interesting trial to watch. That and Cardi B is going to be another interesting one to watch.
Yeah, there's a lot of activity. Fortunately, like you said, there is this ecosystem that happened, and I was on there today. First time I hopped on there, and it was very interesting to watch. I think it was 9 different lawyers sort of in real time, jockeying off and opining on what they were watching in court. People objection at the same time, or just even the little one-off comments. I was having trouble sort of, deciphering what was going on in court versus what was actually being said from the lawyers. And so it was an interesting experience.
Well,
and there was like,
I know, I love it. And people in the chat are like, shut up, panel. We want to hear it. And Nick's
yeah,
like, if you want to listen to the trial, go to Law and Crime, go to
right.
the other one that was broadcasting it in real time. I think it was NBC or whatever. You're here for some rowdy chat, and you're here for some arguably inappropriate humor coming from some of the panel members. But that's
Right.
what you're there for. And it keeps you entertained.
It really was very interesting, and there was some good thoughts and good comments, and it's cool to see a lot of people having interest in this. It's sort of like a dream come true for a criminal defense attorney, especially what we talk about here on this channel. It's about accountability and transparency and justice. And I say that, we shine this big, beautiful spotlight down on our system. And the fact that there's 34,000, 37,000 people all diving in here just to, kind of keep tabs on what the prosecution's doing here is just a cool thing to be, to be watching unfold.
And it's an interesting thing. Robert and we've been discussing it during the streams, like just bringing public attention to the trial itself will bring what's the responsibility, but what's the word I'm looking for? Well, transparency to the entire process, but also it puts pressure on the parties to behave properly. And that means properly from both the prosecutorial perspective and from the defense perspective. And you do, I firmly believe, and we have demonstrable effects of it, you get the aggregate knowledge of the internet in terms of fact, information, strategy. It gets down to the parties on the ground, and it has a real-time effect on what's going on. So when I say entertaining, I don't mean in a cynical, cheap, tawdry type of way. I mean entertaining in that people are watching the legal process in real time. They're learning about what's going on, and they are going to be more informed to go have a discussion with their brethren in society. And you have 37,000 people who now have a perspective that they would have never otherwise had from the headline news summaries of what happened during the day.
Yeah, it's a really neat thing, and it's deep, right? You can really spend a lot of deep time on this. It's not the superficial 2-minute stuff that you might see on Don Lemon, about crossing state lines with a firearm or whatever. You really get to see the entire alternative. And when you start to see that, when you get to see, oh, these facts in court, even the government's own witnesses seem to be contradicting a lot of the other facts that we heard in the news or in a lot of the social media sources and things like that. But I want to jump into the case because, you and I could probably riff all day about, a lot of other stuff. But today the state just rested. The prosecution ended their presentation to the jurors. And, I'm kind of curious maybe if we could put on a prosecution hat, for example, and say, what was good or useful that the prosecution did? Does anything stand out? And I know that's a really hard question, given the fact that what we just watched was what it was. But any thoughts that kind of rings your bell?
Well, here's the thing. So, full disclosure, everybody knows that I'm a Montreal, Quebec attorney. Never practiced criminal law. I studied it. I know what I know. I know what I don't know usually, and I know where I should not venture off too much on my own expertise, and I don't. Now, we've discussed, what the prosecution has done right, what they've done wrong, and I've heard explanations from attorneys who I know more than me and whose opinions I rely on, and they disagree, and I know which one I ultimately agree with. Some things went good for the prosecution. I guess, they're painting the narrative that Rittenhouse should just never have been there, and that by having chosen to go to a dangerous situation with a very dangerous, scary AR-15 strapped to his body, I swear to you, Binger must have gone to a focus group to have them say, show the gun as many times as possible and remind them that there was a big mean strap and it was attached to his person. But for that, call me biased, I learned facts about this case from the prosecution that I never knew and that are egregious. And it didn't seem that they prepped their witnesses. It didn't seem that they, let their witnesses even know what the questions were going to be. So Grosskreutz testimony was an unmitigated disaster. The Sam and Sal's testimony was pretty close to an unmitigated disaster, and I don't know why they called them. And so it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback and judge others who do the work, but some mistakes are unjustifiable. But anything that stood out, I would not have called certain witnesses, And arguably, if you don't call Zeminski, the guy who fired the office pop in the air, which got everything started, you call Grosskreutz, you better damn well know what he's going to say and control what he's going to say, in the sense of not asking him questions that the answers are not going to be particularly good for. But the cross on Grosskreutz was a disaster.
Yeah, and it's, I love how you preface. I'm not a criminal lawyer in Wisconsin. I'm not a criminal lawyer in Wisconsin either. I do criminal law, but I'm in Arizona and California, and so it is. It's, there's a distance there, and so it does make it somewhat difficult to discuss the details and the specificities. But that's kind of what's so interesting about that ecosystem that you were describing earlier, that you get this cross section of different opinions and different lawyers that have different thoughts about what they just saw, and it's kind of universal. I mean, there are different opinions on how to practice law, and of course you have people who are ultra litigious, and you have people that are sort of a little bit more loose and fly by the seat of their pants. And so there's a big spectrum of attorneys that exist out there. But here, you're not a criminal lawyer, but you're still seeing some fundamental problems with kind of the skeleton of the case. You've got some credibility problems. You've got some questions that are being asked by prosecutors where it doesn't seem like they know the answers that are coming out on the other end. And it doesn't matter what country you're from, like you need to get that stuff right.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but there are a great many similarities between the two systems regardless. So certain things are similar. Others, you don't know about the nuances of Wisconsin law or Georgia law, which have very unique citizens arrest laws, self-defense laws. So setting that aside, there's certain things. It's like, I don't need to be a grandmaster to watch a game of chess and know where people are making mistakes. I may not be a grandmaster, but some mistakes are much more obvious than others. You don't open with your rook pawn, never, ever, and there's no good reason to do it. So seeing some of the things, like the prosecution brought up Sam and Sal, the children of the car shop owners, the car doctor. They brought them up, and they wanted them, from their testimony, to say, we never asked Rittenhouse or any of these militia members to be there. On the one hand, they wanted these guys to portray them as militia members, whatever that means, and suggest, or at least get out from them, that they had no business being on the property. But that's factually, obviously incorrect. And so the question is, when they'll come up in prosecution or they'll come up in defense, but there's only so much ahead of the bad facts that you can get without actually making the case for the defense. And you set up a situation where the witnesses were visibly uncomfortable giving answers, visibly deceptive or elusive, and they got destroyed on cross as well. So strategic mistakes. What do? Either better prep, and that does not mean telling the witness what to answer full stop. It might just mean not asking certain questions and then hope that the defense doesn't know to ask the question. You can't get a witness to lie, and so you shouldn't ask them a question that they're going to have a motivated reason for which to lie. And it happened over and over again.
Right. Yeah. There was something that happened with Grosskreutz that I think illustrated that perfectly. It was almost like the prosecution is not asking, during their interviews, they're not asking that one final question just to see where it goes, that they should be asking, knowing that the defense is going to be asking that next question and then coming up with a line of cross based upon that. So I know that was really convoluted, but there was a situation with Grosskreutz where he was asked about, I think the guy's name was Jacob Marshall, a former roommate, about that Facebook message that Grosskreutz apparently communicated to his roommate that he wanted, to empty the full mag or whatever into Kyle Rittenhouse. And when Corey Chirafisi came out and on the cross-examination went after Grosskreutz and said, isn't he your roommate? Yes, and all these things. And he got Grosskreutz to anchor in there. I never said that. I never told Jacob Marshall that ever happened. And Corey just let that one hang. He said, so you never did? Never at all? Oh, okay. And so, it's like he anchored that in, knowing that they're calling Jacob Marshall in a couple days. And the fact that the prosecution didn't sort of prepare that witness for that possibility, for that line of questioning, because what's going to happen on Wednesday, tomorrow, the defense is going to bring Marshall in and he's going to say, yeah, I told him that exactly. Or he told me that exactly when he was lying in the hospital bed.
Yeah. Or Marshall's going to come and say, no, he never told me that, or I misunderstood, yada, yada. I mean, one thing which I don't think they asked him this, Grosskreutz, is, okay, were you familiar with that Facebook post? Had you seen it? And if you had seen it, did you not immediately ask him to take it down because it wasn't true?
Yeah.
So I don't think they got there, because I don't think I missed anything. There was a venue to explore there, and now they're going to get Marshall, presumably, who's going to either say, yes, he said it, or no, he didn't say it, it was a lie, or I misunderstood and it was a misunderstanding. But at the end of the day, I mean, you had him in real time saying, I feared for my life. I pulled out my gun with a bullet in the chamber, but I wasn't going to kill him because it's not in my composition to do that. But I was chasing him down with the gun in fear of my life, protecting what I thought was a threat to my life. There's only one way to do that, regardless of how you actually want to say it. There's only one way to do that. But when he said that clip now heard around the world, so it was only when you raised your gun after pursuing him and pointed the gun at him that he fired on you, correct? And then Krause with his hands, which that guy's going to learn a very valuable lesson. The cameras are always on you. You always conduct yourself with proper demeanor. And even if he was thinking of something else entirely, never give the pose that can be misinterpreted, although that pose was not misinterpreted.
Not misinterpreted. He communicated exactly what was on his mind to the whole world, because we all watched it at the same time and all of us felt that. Oh my goodness. Even the court reporter, I saw you posted about the court reporter.
She was like, did he just say that? What? I mean, it's glorious. She might also have been thinking of, something else, just a total random thought. All of these things came together at the same time. And it's quite clear what happened. And it was catastrophic. It was catastrophic.
It was. And, some people are speculating, I don't know whether or not that, the reason that Krause and the prosecutors were so, taken aback by that, because they weren't expecting that answer, or they had coached him a different way and then something changed at the last minute. Huh. But, I mean, to Grosskreutz credit, for whatever you think of the guy, he was honest about that and he answered the question accurately.
Yeah. And I mean, Rekieta, and when you talk about, I don't know what I know Rekieta does not do criminal law, but he's got good reflexes and a good brain. And he says, when he's answering the question, so you're pointing the gun at him. If you prep a witness properly, you could, it's really weird, but the witness could say, no, I wasn't pointing it at him. I was pointing it behind him. It was an off direction. So the witness was just not even prepped for their own lies. And they were not even prepped for a reasonably decent cross-examination. But there were a lot of other answers he could have given, and that a reasonably prepped witness who knows what's on the line could do. As far as I'm concerned, Grosskreutz he sabotaged any discreet settlement he was hoping to get from his civil suit. And I don't know if there's going to be public pressure. You might know this better than me, in terms of people are saying, can Grosskreutz be criminally charged now? Did he not just admit to, basically, if it's not attempted murder, it's definitely assault? Did not admit to it, and then can he be charged, or is he past any reasonable time frame within which to be charged for a crime?
Probably not outside of a statute of limitations. I don't know what it is specifically in Wisconsin, but in Arizona, it's 7 years. So you can do something and they can hang on to the charges for 7 years. I've had clients charged with, criminal drug charges 4 years after it happened, even though they've gotten clean and sober. So, it's one of those things. So they could probably, if they wanted to, go after Grosskreutz, but I can't imagine that they would. I mean, when a case like this goes through a prosecutor's office, they plant their stakes. They know what side of the case that they're going to land on, and they're going to put all their eggs in that basket. So, it's really hard for a DA's office to go through, let's say, well over a year of a criminal prosecution, pounding the table every day saying, Gage Grosskreutz, American hero, was trying to stop an active shooter, was a victim in a shooting. And this poor guy got his, arm blown off, and then turn around at the close of trial and say, well, just kidding. We screwed that up and we're going to prosecute him for murder now.
Well, you know what? I mean, they could argue I don't know how they would not have known that his concealed carry was without a permit, and therefore, I presume, highly illegal to have a concealed carry without. It's not that he didn't have a permit; it lapsed and he never renewed it, which is, euphemism for illegal, unlawful concealed carry. They could say, "Well, we didn't know that. We didn't know this." His testimony opened up new facts that he did not disclose to us. So now, because of public pressure, perhaps, that bright light now on the district attorney that went after Kyle Rittenhouse with the full extent of the law, and seems to have given a pass to Grosskreutz. Maybe that pass has been revoked now because a little too many people know a little too much and they can't pretend they didn't know it themselves. We'll see.
Yeah, and he just admitted it in open court on the record in front of the entire country. So that kind of changes the equation a little bit. I totally understand that.
I just still can't get over the headlines that are being run on some news outlets. Grosskreutz said, quote, "I feared for my life," end quote, when confronting Rittenhouse. I mean, the mainstream media treats people like idiots, not because people are idiots, but because they know that people are too busy to actually get the information, and they will be easily manipulated because of their ignorance of the actual facts. To run those headlines, it's what MSM does. It's egregious.
I haven't seen much of it. Honestly, I've been trying to sort of disconnect from a lot of the headline stuff because I read at the start of this trial, I read something over on the New York Times that I watched happen in court, and it was not the same. Like what this reporter was reporting was insane. It wasn't even remotely close. And so my blood just started to boil. And, I think that Kyle Rittenhouse, and this is another topic that I don't know, anything about, but, these defamation claims that people are talking about. I mean, the narrative that was spun prior to this trial starting was so different and so, malicious in many circumstances against Rittenhouse. We saw Joe Biden, I think, used an image of him in a campaign ad, calling him a, sort of a white supremacist, right? All of these different labels. And you look at trial and you have this young man who's just sitting there watching every single one of the government's witness, or most of them have some pretty problematic testimony, especially when you consider their burden. It's a high burden. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, and we got this far, and man, it's just, I'm sure a lot of people out there like me are hot over it. It's kind of one of those things we've been following.
Exculpatory testimony is an understatement, and I remember from the beginning, I didn't think that Rittenhouse was guilty. My reaction was, why is a 17-year-old kid doing this in the first place? It's more of a testament to the police failure than to anything else. But even I, in the facts that I knew at the time, and I'm more involved than most. Do you guys hear the piano in the background? If it gets too loud, let me know and I'll tell a child to stop practicing. Even in the facts that I knew, I didn't know that there were, what did they say, dozens, if not 100 people with cars or armed individuals protecting businesses. I didn't know that the police saw Kyle Rittenhouse and his friends with their AR-15s strapped to their bodies and didn't tell them to disperse or go home, didn't say, how old are you? Show me a permit for that weapon. There were so many facts that I didn't know as to how bad everything actually was and what occurred. Because I'm gonna tweet this out afterwards. This was my most recent thought. There are two people who are extremely lucky to be alive, and this is what I'm realizing right now. Grosskreutz and Rittenhouse, because I had no idea. It wasn't imminent. They would have killed him with the blink of an eye had they had their opportunity. And when Grosskreutz testified, what were you going to do? I don't know what I was going to do. I was never given the opportunity, or I never had the opportunity. He was 1 second away from pulling a trigger, and if he were more methodical, he would have done it differently and probably accomplished his goal. I had no idea how bad it really was. I just knew the overview facts from the videos that I saw, the New York Times breakdown, and I said, yeah, this looks like self-defense if you're allowed to carry the gun in any event, or there's no provocation or whatever. I had no idea how bad it was, and I'm learning myself from this trial.
I agree with you completely. When I was listening to Grosskreutz yesterday, I was taken aback by the drawn out testimony that he presented, sort of about the watching Kyle, re-rack the firearm. It was really broken down, and he sort of, they did a nice job on that. If I can give the prosecution any credit for anything in this trial, it was that. It was powerful. They broke it down sort of second by second, long drawn out questions, and you get to sort of experience it from Grosskreuz's perspective. You get to sort of watch what he's saying. I look at Rittenhouse, he re-racks the gun slowly, and he walks us through the thought process that, he in that instant thought the only reason that Rittenhouse could be doing that was because he had already fired, had already tried to shoot him, and something malfunctioned in the gun, which is what caused the re-rack. And I thought that was, was powerful, but it was a nice red herring. It was an attempt to slow that moment down so that you'd focus on that rather than on the fact that the sequence of events went that, well, he didn't, during that entire sequence, he may have been re-racking it. He may have been pointing at him. He may have had, a twinge in his eye and a murderous glow, whatever it is, but he didn't shoot. He didn't pull the trigger on that. It wasn't until Grosskreutz actually, slowed that down and dropped the weapon down that's when Rittenhouse actually shot. And, didn't, to your point, kill Grosskreutz, right? I mean, shot him in the arm, whether that was intentional or not. That could have gone down entirely differently.
No, it's. I mean, I think I would imagine he was not trying to maim Grosskreutz by disabling the arm that was holding the gun. I'm actually starting to think that it was just a fluke that Rittenhouse survived. Like, I'm not sure that he's a methodical marksmith who was trained in all of this. I mean, he reacted well, but I think it's just an absolute fluke that he survived all of that. It's and seeing what was going on, the individuals involved, the general ambiance. I've learned things that make it even more egregious than we were told, and that those who were looking for the information at the beginning believed. And this is just part one of it. I mean, this is the scrutiny. Democracy dies in darkness, and I guess liberty is born under the disinfecting effects of the sunlight. This is going to be the new standard going forward. And my only concern is they're just going to find a way to prevent the live streaming, continual viewing on alternative news outlets to continue going forward. I suspect there's a reason why Canada wants to control the internet.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I was talking to Rittenhouse earlier, or I think yesterday, and he was telling me that, Kim Potter, that other trial that's going to be happening, I think out of Minnesota, she was the woman who shot Dante Wright. He was driving away in the car on the side of that highway, and she thought that she was going to tase him and ended up shooting him and killing him. Rittenhouse told me that trial is not going to be televised. And, that was in the same court that Derek Chauvin was in. And, you sort of see what happened with that. And I'm wondering, since your channel, you get a ton of eyeballs on the legal news. It's this new ecosystem that you sort of talked about. Is there going to be an effort to squash that to some degree?
I mean, no question. There's going to be an effort to control it. There's going to be an effort to disincentivize it. There's no question in my mind. I did not know that trial is not going to be televised, because one thing in that trial, my initial reaction was, how do you get your taser and your gun confused? And then I see what these tasers and what these guns look like, and they're virtually indistinguishable. Now, everyone out there who's smarter than me also says you're trained to pull your gun from your left, your taser from your right, whatever side it is. Others saying you get confused sometimes. Gymnasts, when they get the, what's the word for it? When they lose track of where the ceiling and the floor is. That young gymnast just got it last.
Vertigo?
It's sort of like vertigo, but only when you're in the air, you lose track of where the floor and the ceiling is, and it becomes impossible to do anything. And those glitches happen. So in that case, I think the world might learn a lot of stuff that they would say, why on God's green earth would they make tasers look so much like guns and feel like guns? And then they say, why do they order these? Which other police departments order these particular makes, models? So it puts everything under scrutiny, and it gives the incentive to find ways to get around it, because some entities do not like responding to the transparency of the public view.
Yeah, and no question about that. And, it's very frustrating for guys like us who want to be able to look at these things and comment on it. And then you have to sort of, to be fair to the other side, the courts also take a look at, how do you ensure that justice is able to continue, moving forward in these courts? Because, candidly, Derek Chauvin was a media circus, and the courts are kind of caught in this hard place, where they want to be transparent more or less, but they've got a lot of political pressure to do certain things a certain way. I mean, we saw how difficult it was to move Chauvin out of that particular jurisdiction. And so, this case now with Rittenhouse, we're starting to see this media problem bubble up again. The court today, this morning, I think the judge was talking about somebody was taking photographs of the jurors who were getting on the bus to go to the Rittenhouse trial this morning. Somebody was videoing them. There was also, I think George, I didn't dig into this story, but apparently somebody's posting images or posting videos threatening the jurors. I don't know if it's George Floyd's cousin or something like that. I saw a headline about that.
I know. I love it, Robert. We weigh our words the same way, because I have no idea. Like, someone tweets it and then they say who the individual is. I have no way of vetting it. So this is one thing. The difference between being a journalist and an analyst is I'm not going in to vet the source in order to repeat it. I've seen it, and this is the double-edged sword again. Transparency, publicity is good on the one hand, but then creates the exposure of mob rule intimidation on the other. If nobody knows who the juror members are, you can't have that same type of public intimidation. But public intimidation versus private intimidation, it exists one way or the other if the stakes are high enough. It doesn't need to be the general public harassing or intimidating the witnesses. It's going to find a way to happen nonetheless. So all things being equal, transparency and sunlight is the way to go. But I just love, someone in the chat, Robert said, I've been eating for 39 years. I still occasionally bite my tongue. We can screw up the easiest of tasks. And I have a chronic problem of biting my tongue and my lips. But yeah, I mean, interesting way of looking at it. But it is always going to be the interplay. When the more publicity, the more scrutiny, then the more vocal the various interest groups can become and find nefarious ways to influence the process. But that happens even in the darkest of regimes. So
yeah,
err on the side of
right. And I agree. Right. You got to err on the side of, I think, transparency and openness, because, sunlight is the best disinfectant on all of these issues, in my opinion. And I don't know what happened here with, this allegation of video threats or whatever that is. I wouldn't have even mentioned it, but for the judge mentioning it in court today. The judge said that on the way into court, they were watching somebody specifically filming the jurors. We know that somebody else essentially was making threats, vote the right way or else. And so, you start to, layer those things in, and you start to have some concerns for it. And I think it's reasonable to call that stuff out.
Yeah. So
when you see it.
The DA being called out by a witness for corruption was really bad. I mean, all of this, it's glorious because it will make people act more responsibly if they think and truly appreciate that everything they're doing will be subject to public scrutiny at one point in time.
I wanted to ask you about sort of the judge and the courtroom and the demeanor. So, it's something that's I'm familiar with. So in Arizona, we have about 180 courts. We've got some really big courts, really busy courts, and some really small courts that are sort of in the middle of nowhere. I've been to almost all of them. And, I've seen a big smattering of judges and how they organize and operate their courtrooms. You're from a different part of the continent here. What's your take on the judge, and sort of the way that he manages the courtroom? Sort of things kind of are a little bit looser than they are here. How does it connect? How does it relate to things where you're from?
So I've done civil throughout the province. If anybody knows the province, in Montreal, Court of Appeal, a place called Sherbrooke, which is a small town near the border. Quebec City, I've had trials, which is a smaller town. I've been to some municipal stuff. It looks pretty standard for me. The courtroom and the demeanor and not the decorum, but the courtroom in a Rittenhouse looks more familiar to me than what I saw in Ahmaud Arbery, which really seemed like a tight group, a small room. I couldn't tell even the layout as to how they were sitting and addressing the judge. But no, the judge is cool. I think everybody changes a little bit when they know that the camera is on, for good and for bad. This judge looked like he is, generally speaking, patient, calm, cool, collected, funny, lighthearted. Quoting the Bible is not something you see all the time, but
right.
You swear, at least not in Quebec anymore, but you swear on the Bible, so it's not all that absurd to quote from the Bible. But I like him. He's probably the best judge for this case. I liked the judge in Chauvin until certain things started to cause me to think maybe the judge is starting to reveal some underlying preconceptions, or maybe the judge changed opinions throughout the trial. Who knows? But no, this judge is great, and I like the feeling of the courtroom.
Do you think? I guess where do you think this goes from here? Or do you think we're wrapping this up pretty soon? I mean, we heard the defense come in. They started some direct examination today with their witnesses. We had 3 of those people today. Not sure how much of the trial you got to see, today or this morning, but we just started with it. I know that they're scheduled for Marshall tomorrow, and then I think we might be closed on Thursday on Veterans Day. Do you know about that?
No, I don't know about the scheduling. I think the only question is the unknown is whether or not they're going to call Kyle. I've watched pretty much all of it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yesterday, I had a kid home from school. We got a new fish tank because our old one had all the guppies had babies. And so we had like 50 baby guppies in this tiny tank. So we had to get a bigger one. But I'm putting it together. I've got Rakeda live streaming in the background. I've got my kid asking me what's going on in the trial and learning about it. And, you know, but setting aside, we didn't see the images of Grosskreutz arm, which will deter her from becoming a doctor. But it's a learning for them, which is great. But I've listened to basically all of it. You know, at this point, it's the defense's case to lose. And so if they do something stupid, it could have an impact. As far as I'm concerned, it was a done deal after prosecution closed. And I was just looking to see what the poll results were. We're up to like 8,000 votes. And it is, as to whether or not they should call Rittenhouse as a witness, 65% say no, but 15% say yes. And
Wow.
I don't know. I should have prefaced it to say that if you're acting in the best interest of Rittenhouse, should he be called as a witness? Because there might be some people up there who want to see him get up there to blow the whole case. But no, I think they're going to wind up soon. And they should, because I think not only has the prosecution not made its case, it's made the case of the defense clearly.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that. I don't see any reason why Kyle would have to come out and testify. I think that at this moment, some people, you know, when you see your opponent start to falter a little bit, sometimes people want you to deliver that knockout blow, you know, and make sure you can send one home for the history books just to make sure. But, you know, I don't think so. I don't think we need to do that here. I think that what we've seen, like you said, has been sort of a lot of witnesses that were pretty bad. And even the ones that weren't bad per se, they were not really relevant. You know, they were just kind of there. They just kind of put them up there. And they continued with this theme that, you know, Rittenhouse was somebody who committed a series of violations, but that's not murder. You know, that's not intentional homicide. And so,
then,
you know,
it's the thing that people don't even appreciate. But, you know, even being in possession of an unlawful firearm does not mean you surrender to death and are precluded from using it for self-defense. You know, we've discussed it with Brody and the bunch. So even if he had committed a crime, even if he shouldn't have been there, once he's there and you've got all of these people doing everything that we now know they were doing, with the culmination of somebody holding a gun, pointing it with the intent to neutralize, to save his own life, what else is he supposed to do? Just, that's it? Because you showed up with a gun, you must now die, is how Rakeda is, you know, phrasing it. But hopefully they just don't do anything to really blow the advantage that they have now, because it's beyond not even proving the case. They've proven self-defense as far as anybody who's paying attention, even up to David Pakman, beyond a reasonable doubt. They've proven self-defense. So
yeah, you saw that clip, Dave Pakman. Right, he's sort of he's kind of a lefty guy, right?
Kind of. he's as lefty as they come. And as far as, you know, misrepresenting the news to frame it politically, he's right up there. In my humble opinion, he's got his job and he's got his audience, but he's been bad in misrepresenting things in the past.
I wanted to ask you one final kind of trial question, and then I wanted to get an update on, you know, what else is going on in your life. I know you just ran for office. I know, you know, you're doing a lot of stuff. And so I wanted to kind of do just a quick debrief on that before we let you go. I know you've got a hard stop here in about 15 minutes.
No, but I could not, if you want to keep me for longer, don't worry about it. I'll wait until I get a knock on the basement door.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I just want to be respectful of your time. So I appreciate that. But the other thing that happened today that I thought was interesting, just wanted to get your thoughts on it, was we saw there was a lot of photographs that were being submitted of Anthony Huber. I think it was Anthony Huber, but we also got, you know, sort of the picture of his dead body. You know, we saw the picture of the bullet wounds. You mentioned, you know, you've got your children and they got to see a little portion of Grosskreutz, you know, or you said they didn't get to see a portion of that.
Or Huber. They didn't see that or Huber, just so no one accuses me of.
Yeah. I misspoke. I shouldn't have even ventured into that category. But the point here, you know, that stuff is shocking. It's traumatic. It's why you don't want your children to see that. And a lot of the jurors who were on the panel, you know, these are everyday people. These are people who are, you know, just like, you know, the rest of us, and they're not sort of in the mix with this type of stuff on a regular basis. And so the prosecution, they did a pretty good job of this the entire trial, of showing the shots. I mean, we saw Thomas Binger with like 21 different exhibits or whatever, showing all the multiple angles of Kyle Rittenhouse. You know, every single time the gun went off, this angle, that angle, this angle, that angle. And then today, the dead bodies and all of that. What kind of effect do you think that has on the jurors? Do you think that might lead them to want to, kind of punish Kyle, or a split decision, or how do you think that plays?
This is where I don't know if my internal bias is making me feel the way I do. I saw all those pictures and I didn't say, Kyle Rittenhouse, you monster. I looked at those pictures and I said, what did you idiots think was going to happen with what you were doing? Like, it's like, what did Grosskreutz think was going to happen when he pulled a gun on someone who's carrying a gun? Now, I don't have a weak stomach for those types of things. Physiologically, I thought the destruction was actually sort of like medically or scientifically fascinating, because it's like it was vaporized, like Grosskreutz said. There was nothing. It was just a hole, and I would have thought there would have been actually more blood spraying. Whatever. And showing the dead bodies, some people don't like that, even if you're trying to prove a point. It's like sort of saying the N word with a hard R, trying to prove a point as to how offensive it is. Well, all that you end up doing is getting the person pissed off at you. So someone continually flashing a dead body in front of my face doesn't necessarily make me hate the person that they make me want to hate. It might make me hate them. And when I see these pictures, that's my reaction. That's my reflex. And I also say, you guys, what did you expect to happen when you did what you did? And that is not going to change my opinion. But maybe that's my internal biases. But with a jury who's probably never seen that before, I'm not sure, having seen the surrounding circumstantial evidence, that the conclusion they're going to derive or draw from that is that Rittenhouse is a monster. It's that these people went out looking for, to play stupid games. And that's what happened. And can you blame Rittenhouse now, having seen all of the facts and all of the evidence? And I don't think anybody could. You could blame him for being there. He probably would be much happier and much better off in life if he had just stayed home. But someone made a very interesting response to me when I said that. I said, would Rittenhouse be happier if he just stayed home? And he says, well, ask that of any assault victim. Ask that of any victim. Would you have been happier if you just stayed home that night? And that seems tantamount to blaming, in the sense that, yeah, if you stayed home and didn't go to the bar and didn't get assaulted, you'd be happier. But is that how you live your life? Do you live your life by letting the city burn instead of doing what you think is your civic duty to protect it? And then once you do that, do you surrender your life and your right to exist? And I think we're going to find out the answer sooner than later.
Yeah. I think that, well, there's a lot there. I want to make sure that we talk about what's been going on in your world, because I didn't get the opportunity to invite you on when you were running for office, and I feel like a total jerk about it.
Oh, it wouldn't have made a difference, Robert. I got 1,500 votes.
But this is important. I think that, we talk about it all the time. What can you do? The world is sort of, a mess all around us. You're on the thick of it. I mean, I watch almost all your stuff. I watch your Vivas on the Streets, you and Barnes regularly. You actually speak about this stuff, and then you put your money where your mouth is. You ran for office and you did all of that. And that was a big endeavor. That was some time ago. Has everything settled down? Have you recovered from that?
So it was actually, you appreciate what a drain it is, because it was a full-time thing. In addition to, I didn't want it to affect my content creation, which is the living. And I couldn't interfere with family, which also is a full-time job as well. It was exhausting. And the results were somewhat depressing. And I say, people have told me I should not be depressed and I should be proud. I tripled the vote for our candidates in our district. The party as a whole tripled their overall votes nationwide. It got a conversation going. I got to have my FU moment to Marc Garneau, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, when we're in a debate. I got my sound bites. I got my voice out there. And at the end of the day, 1,500 people, 1,497, I think, voted for me, which was up from 500 from the last election. And that's a vote of confidence. I don't like losing. Even if I knew that I didn't have a chance in the first place, I don't like losing, and I don't typically do things to lose. But it was a great experience. It's not over, because anybody living in Canada now knows the individual who won in my riding, Marc Garneau, is now going to be appointed to an ambassadorship, apparently rumor on the street, in December. And when he gets appointed to an ambassadorship, the seat becomes vacant, and they have to call a by-election within 6 months of the seat becoming vacant. So I may very well have to run again within the next 6 months. which I knew there was a reason why I kept my billboards. I was going to sign them off and make some messages and do a fundraiser, which I guess I'll wait for another 6 months, but I might be running again in a by-election within the next 6 months.
What is going on in Canada with sort of the situation with COVID right now? I mean, I've been so focused on Rittenhouse that, I just want to sort of check in on that.
I would say it's over the top. It varies by province. Some provinces are more over the top than others. Starting east to west, I mean, anybody who's been watching me knows, like Nova Scotia had a court order where they effectively prohibited protests, COVID protests, because of the public risk. Alberta, what just happened in Alberta? Oh, the locking up the pastors, prosecuting the pastors with the full extent of the law. It is over the top, the response, and the numbers in Canada, for anybody who knows, are just they're not enough to justify this in any realm of reality. And we've had 2 years of this stuff going on. They haven't increased hospital capacity. What they've done instead is, spend millions and millions on ads. And then they get to the point where they're going to fire healthcare workers. But the most recent stuff out of Quebec and Ontario, they're not going to fire unvaccinated healthcare workers because, it might cause impossible strain. But I like to say that there's a bit of a shift in the public opinion, the public view of what's going on. But they're going after vaccination for 5 to 11-year-olds. They want to approve that. I don't know which vaccine in Canada. And our prime minister says he's already bought the vaccines. So he's just waiting on his own regulatory agency to approve the vaccine that they've already bought in order to then implement the vaccine rollout for children aged 5 to 11, when our public health director, whatever her name is, Theresa Tam, just yesterday says, serious infection for kids is infinitesimally rare. There have been 350,000 infections in 19 years and under, and there have been 20 deaths, maybe. And knowing what we know now, that awful story where they exploited the death of a 14-year-old with stage 4 brain cancer who was in a coma allegedly when they tested him, and then blamed his death on COVID. Knowing that was one example, I can only question the other 20. But they want to vaccinate these kids, and they want to presumably get to a point in time where they're going to condition access to sporting events, bars, coffee shops, etc., on full vaccination for 12 years old and up. And it is very distressing and depressing.
Well, yeah, the same thing's happening here. Obviously, Big Bird now is endorsing, the vaccines and things. So it's now on Sesame Street. So
can you? I mean, this is the world we live in. I saw that tweet and I said that tweet has to be fake. It cannot be real. And then it turns out to be real. Then I see Joe Biden responding to that tweet, and I say, this can't be real life. Like, this could not have happened. And then I find the original tweet. It's the clown world has become the meme, but it's a fascist. I mean, it's fascism by definition, from what I understand, when you basically have the media working with the government to promote policy that is dictated by the government. Big Bird? And what kind of kids are on Twitter anyhow? Who is that directed at? That's directed at adults, which makes it even sicker because it's directed at adults or kids to get to the kid. I mean, it's sick. And you got one puppet retweeting or interacting with another puppet, quite literally.
Born Not to Run had a super chat, says, Viva, if you lose at the next election, will you just give up and move to Texas already?
I've set certain standards for when I'm going to say that the country has left me, and this is not Canada anymore. It's Canada 2.0, and I don't want to, it's not my Canada. We'll see. I'm hoping the pendulum is starting to swing back the other way, because I think when people start hearing doctors say we're going to vaccinate 5 to 11-year-olds, even though there's, the risk of serious infection is infinitesimally rare, maybe some parents who were on board are going to say it's gone too far even for me. We'll see. But we're getting to a critical point where I've drawn my lines in the sand, and we'll see if those get trampled on. So not yet, but it's certainly not off the table. The only difficult thing is when you have 3 kids, it's a totally different realm of consideration. You have to ask yourself, it's maybe not even what's going to be best for my kids, what's going to be least destructive for my kids. Upending everything that they know and have established in Canada, in Montreal, to move to Texas, dude, I would have done it in a heartbeat if I had no kids. But you have to ask yourself what is going to be better for, or at the very least destructive for the kids.
Yeah, right. And That's a big move. Uprooting everything, reestablishing. It's not just your life; it's a whole family, and that is a big move. And there may come a time, right? There may come a time, and you'll make that decision when you get there.
People are a little, I won't say glib, but I don't think they fully appreciate it. You say like, okay, you're living under a tyrannical dictatorship with face masks is terrible for kids. And I agree. The question is what in the long run is actually going to cause more distress to a kid, taking them away from every friend that they know here, the only life that they've ever known. Sure, you'll reestablish. Kids are resilient, although I think there's a reason why a lot of adults have issues. Kids are not all that resilient. They're actually quite vulnerable, which is why we have to protect them. But you just have to really do a mathematical assessment. What will cause more harm to the kids? And it's not cut and dry, black and white, but there is a line in the sand where if I no longer have full say over parental authority of my kids, and the government thinks it does, then we become, what's the word? Not wardens of the state. We become property of the state, which I know some people think we've already become, but I don't feel that. When we get to my line, then there shall be movement, probably.
Right. Well, I know this is not Rittenhouse stuff, but it is all sort of related. People are looking around, watching their rights kind of slowly erode day by day, and they're getting pretty sick and tired of it. And that's kind of what this Rittenhouse case symbolizes. It was on Sunday, Monday that the entire city was being burnt to the ground. And some people stood up and they responded to it. They went out there, they wanted to stop the rioting and the protesting, and something bad happened. Just sort of what your point was earlier. The idea being kind of you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes to some degree. And if the jury is going to be shown, bodies as a result of a stupid prize of a stupid game, maybe it's not going to be something that is overly persuasive. They're not going to sit there and go, I can't believe Kyle did that. They're just going to say, look, this was a war zone. What do you expect in a war zone?
And it was a great move to bring in who Rakeda has dubbed a Grambo. I mean, it's so weird. I'm jogging on a treadmill listening to this going on, and I didn't know exactly who she was when they brought her up. She's one of the people that they want to depict as being militia. I don't know if she's a grandmother. I suspect she is a grandmother, but not to say she looked old. She actually looked kind of young. But this woman who shows up, and she came to protect property. The other guy, the real estate agent, was filming because he's seeing his town burn to the ground. And not only are the police not doing anything, not only are they given a pass to the destruction, they then give a pass to the perpetrators of that destruction, and then they prosecute the only individual who probably is the most law-abiding and caring citizen in all of this. I know people are going to find that to be a horrendous thing to say because he killed 2 people. But even from all the testimony, from all that video footage, just people with baseball bats smashing cars, from the testimony of even the people who just saw Rittenhouse after he shot the Rosenbaum, pale, sick, distraught. I mean, that's not a cold-hearted killer. That's someone who life has put in a circumstance that is beyond him. But no, people are. I hope people are getting fed up. And the FJB, I mean, when you see that, it's not a meme anymore. It's an actual movement. And I'm just hoping, I'm seeing it a lot more in the States. And the States has a lot of trickle-up effect to Canada. And we tend to be behind, but influenced by the States, which is why we still have Justin Trudeau, talking about all sorts of identity politics issues, other issues, which are environmental crises, all these things. He's talking about that, but in the States, the people are talking about freedom and taking back their freedom from the government. And I hope that trickles up to Canada. And maybe I'll be sort of like that first crystal when the water starts to freeze over, that the others crystals sort of latch on to or spread away from in Canada. So,
yes, I think the answer is yes. I think that, people like you are people who are willing to, not only talk about it, but get out there and run. I mean, I think it's admirable as hell. And I want to have you on the show next time. so that
anytime. Don't worry about that. No, but I realized there was nothing. I was focusing a lot on national to normalize the People's Party because they've been demonized. You get one no good Nick within the million people who support the BBC that throws gravel at Justin Trudeau, and the entire party becomes a terrorist party. But you have systematic corruption within the Liberal Party, misogyny, racism, ethics breaches, and that's at the top of the party, not some rando at the bottom. That's at the top of the party, and somehow that doesn't define the party and all of its followers. It's an unequal measurement. It's an unequal judgment system. And so my primary goal was to sensitize the world to the fact that the PPC is not a bunch of radicals. We're just a bunch of people who are fed up with the corruption and the government tyranny. But locally, I can safely say I have no chance of winning westbound NDG. Even 2 years after a pandemic, 2 years after the most oppressive government you can imagine, 2 years, 6 years into ethics violations, corruption from the Trudeau government, 53% of the vote within my riding. I don't know. It's like the Watchmen. You can't help people who don't want to help themselves yet. So maybe it's going to take some more time. But anyway, it was fun. I'm going to do it again. But don't worry about that. Let's do streams like this so that the ecosystems that we are building on the YouTube interverses overlap and grow as well. And people, can you imagine? People didn't even know that there was a YouTube law niche that they now know they need in their lives. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about what's going on.
It is a beautiful thing. And, you were describing Grambo, you were saying, kind of earlier that, she was out there protecting her environment and, she kind of stood up. You did the same thing. I'm not comparing you to Grambo or anything, but
Grambo has me, I am not as brave as Grambo. I would be the guy saying, I'm not getting into trouble. I don't, nothing good happens after midnight is my motto. So
yes,
I'm at home.
But the point is that these narratives are starting to sort of crumble to some degree. We heard it. The trial was a good example of this. The theme from the prosecution was militia, 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 lawbreakers out there, white supremacists, kind of without saying it, all these white guys with guns. Okay. During a BLM protest, and that narrative stuck to some degree, but it was just kind of shattered by witness in court today. And, Grambo did a good job of that. Kind of just say, this is who I am. This is how I operate. Yeah, I had a gun. And he said, well, what were you doing with that gun? Were you going to be intimidating people, or was this going to be something that might cause people to be dissuaded? And she's like, yeah, exactly.
That's why you have a gun. And so that's why when you got deceitful Grosskreutz coming up there, it's like, I had my gun for self-defense, but I would never use it. Bull crap. Then don't bring it. Then don't bring it. And then you don't escalate a situation like you did. No, she was great because it's salt of the earth. I mean, she's just an honest, hardworking person that is unaffected by the bull crap and that is fed up with the bull crap. And then you got these weaponized, politically corrupt prosecutors. You have a system that everybody sees for what it is now, and people have just had enough. But not to say that everyone's be running around with guns and trying to play police, but the police should play police, and the police should not just abandon to lawlessness. And let people walk around with metal baseball bats, smashing stuff and burning stuff down. Oh, but they shut off the gas valves at the gas station, so the police were being responsible to minimize the damage. Bull crap. When you can lock up the January 6th guys for 8 months. You use every FBI resource and intelligence resource to go ransack people in Alaska by tracking their buses. You can't do the same for actual. I shouldn't say actual because they were both property destruction. Do it for everything, or don't do it for anything, and then see how that turns out.
Well, yes, and every single, or I shouldn't say every single one, but a large portion of the witnesses described, even from the prosecution's witnesses, described it as being a war zone. I mean, even the police were saying this was an actual war zone. You need a firearm because you're in a war zone. And Robert Barnes had a good comment earlier on Ricada's stream. I think you were on there, but he's saying that Grambo is Kenosha. That's a good sort of caricature of what probably some of the people on the jury look like. Not that they were all like Grambo, but it's a nice cross section of some of the demographics. It's people, small towns, don't like a lot of the the nonsense language, the talking, the back and forth, and her testimony is going to be impactful because it's going to land on people who see themselves in her.
No question, but I just love the fact the public broadcast of these trials is bringing to light a lot of stuff, and there will be an exponential effect as to the awareness that it's going to awaken in a lot of people. But Robert, so this is the funny thing, because not all of us on the panel, some of us on the panel now do this YouTube thing full time, so we can sit here and watch these trials all day long. You're still working you are working a full-time practice during the day.
Yeah, so we have a full law firm. I am not in court every day. Actually, I don't go to court much at all anymore. We have a law firm in Scottsdale. We have about 20 people on our team. We have about 6 lawyers. And so I'm managing that. That's kind of what my mornings are for, law firm business. And then in the afternoon, I sort of change gears into some of the show stuff. And so uh, it's a lot. I've been listening to the trial at double speed. I've been, sort of fast forwarding and scrubbing through a lot of the other, dead time. There's been a lot of that. So I've been sort of juggling both things. But when I hopped on today, it was a lot of fun just to sort of see everybody, opining with their comments. And so I think I'm going to try to make a point to join in on that.
No, I think it's great. I mean, it's great from a cynical perspective. It's great networking, but networking doesn't always have to be like have this cheap cynical side to it. This is a group of friends that
Totally.
you throw this together and people bounce in and bounce out, and this is what everyone else out there likes to see is coming from. I made the mistake of trying to be in there for a few minutes with my kid in the car, and that didn't work out very well. So I bounced in and out real quick. But no, it is amazing, and just do it. You should do it more often. Ron Coleman was on. I mean, Ty Beard, people that we've seen in other contexts, and now we're all connected, and we can all bounce ideas off each other and bounce discussion off each other. But no, I mean, let's talk about a few other things that are going on in the news. I mean, are you following the Project Veritas raids?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So not too deeply. I haven't seen anything formally released from this administration, from the DOJ or anything like that about, the government's explanation about what all this was. But I mean, I can't even believe that it's not a bigger story. I can't believe that I can believe it, but the media, if this had happened to a Rachel Maddow, if this had happened to Anderson Cooper, if they went and raided it, his house, there would be an epic meltdown, and rightfully so.
No, and the flip side of where there would also be a totally differential treatment is if this were a diary of Baron Trump, for example, on Trump, it would be plastered everywhere, assuming it's a real diary. I'm still on the fence about whether or not it's an authentic diary. Barnes is of the opinion that they wouldn't be doing this. They wouldn't be going after the diary recipient with such vigor unless it were a real diary and the stories in there, in fact, true. I say maybe they're weaponizing the falsity of the diary just to go after them, so that you can play that both ways conspiratorially. And I say that non-judgmentally, but if you want to interpret it both ways, but a flipping diary of the president, and you have the president's own personal security force now, personal investigative undercover force, harassing, raiding pre-dawn raids on journalists. And it comes at a time when Project Veritas is talking about very serious things and releasing very serious exposés. When everyone understands the extent of the corruption, that's how change is going to be affected. But the Project Veritas is mind-blowing. And I'm going to stay on it because I know that James O'Keefe appreciates my summaries and often cites them in Instagram posts, but it's just something that's beyond belief that they go after the diary recipient and not arguably the stories in the diary. They go after the computer guy and not the pictures on the computer. They go after everyone involved, but not actual Hunter Biden for presumably an application for a firearm and his girlfriend's sister-in-law for unlawfully disposing of it. We make fun of the Russians, but this is like Soviet level governmental corruption, and people are starting to get wise to it.
It is. You're exactly right. The silver lining in the whole thing is that it's so obvious. It's so transparent. It's right in our faces. And thankfully we do have some, social media and some avenues still available to us where we can talk about these things, but it's just so flagrant. It's, hey, we're in charge now and we're going to go do what we want to do. I've talked about it a lot on our channel, talking about federal encroachment. And I made a slide in my PowerPoint decks where you can go through every single different government institution. You can look at what the Department of Education has done. They're sort of taking away school choice or school decisions from local environments, and they're sort of trying to wrap that up into the Department of Education. So what once was a local issue now is a federal issue. You're seeing that with mask mandates and vaccine mandates. Used to be a business could decide what to do. Not anymore. The feds can. Used to be your property. You used to be able to live there in your house or rent that out. It's not your property anymore. The CDC is in charge of that, and it just continues to go on and on and on. And now we're talking about federal law enforcement officials going after the media. Or you take a case like Kyle Rittenhouse, and you've got a Second Amendment case where in the United States, self-defense was sort of a fundamental, concept here. It's the Second Amendment for a reason. It's there. It's important. We care a lot about it. And now maybe you can't even use it for self-defense because you have some, district attorney's office that wants to make a political case out of this. Everywhere you turn, there's just this consistent encroachment.
Robert, in Canada, I mean, we obviously do not have a Second Amendment. In Canada, you cannot even own a firearm for the purposes of self-defense. And if you go to if you go take the firearm safety course, and anyone gets wise to the idea that you might only want this for self-defense and not for hunting, you will be refused. I mean, I don't know if they'll refuse to give you the permit. And so we're like, there's various stages of this. Some people call it tyranny, others call it communism, whatever. There's various stages of it. And the one, beacon, the shining beacon is still the United States for its, some will call it a reckless love of freedom, but I don't think you can have a reckless love of freedom. You either love freedom or you don't, and it's reckless not to. But you got the United States, then you got, Canada, somewhere in between, and then you go over to Australia, where people have relinquished their most basic rights for the, for the impression of safety and for the and full compliance, so that the government can give them back their privileges or their rights. I mean, we're seeing the full spectrum of what happens when you do not respect your fundamental rights. And I just, I hope people turn sooner than later, but
I hope so.
In a passive democratic way, not in the sense that gives the government the power to come in with more military martial law because of the, what they will demonize as violence.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that people really recognize sort of how close to the line we're getting on these things, at least from a legal perspective. It's easy to see it on a surface level. Like you can see, oh, that's weird. Why is the CDC extending this deadline? Or that's weird. Why do I now have to go get this thing injected into my body now, or else I lose my job? People can sort of see those things, and then they hear some bureaucrat from the White House say, well, this is all legal. It's all lawful. It's all perfectly acceptable.
And
just go do it.
Even when the courts say it's not, do it anyhow. I mean, it's nuts.
Just go do it. Yeah, just go do it. And it doesn't even matter what the courts say, because we are, it's not a final ruling yet, and they spin it, whatever which way they want to spin it. But there are, literal lines in our Constitution there are people in there with little erasers that they're trying to, kind of undo some of that and rewrite what they want done in replacement of, the fundamental underlying provisions that got us here. And so, I think that it's critically important that, guys like you continue to, to push the envelope by talking about these things and keeping the pressure on them. Like you said,
I didn't even know I didn't know that we had a Quarantine Act in Canada. Call me ignorant, call me naive, especially being a lawyer. I never, it was a relatively newly amended law, but countries have Quarantine Acts. And if you read them in non-ridiculous times, you'll say, well, okay, this has got to be for the worst stuff ever, and the government would never do it. I read the Quarantine Act. They could do whatever the hell they want, literally whatever they want. They can appropriate private property. They can detain people. And all they have to have is some administrative bureaucrat on the street say, yeah, it's necessary. Here's my order, obey it otherwise. And I mean, these laws get passed in darkness. People don't know they exist until it's too late. And it's just the invariable abyss that you fall into when the government just becomes so big, it becomes a black hole. And what it sucks in is not light, it sucks in rights. Ooh,
I just love that.
That's damn good.
Love that. Somebody write that down. So do you think that some of this sort of unsettled feelings with the world, a lot of what you described, people sort of waking up, responding to this, do you think that is what is driving a lot of this interest behind the Rittenhouse case? It's sort of this David versus Goliath situation. You've got this 17-year-old at the time, 18-year-old kid who was, in the middle of this war zone. Or what else accounts for all of the interest? There was, like you said, 37,000 people on Nick's stream this afternoon. I mean, it's nuts. It's a swell.
I think it's part of the Let's Go Brandon movement. This is people waking up to the fact that they are being bamboozled by their government, and it's these things. They get a momentum of their own, and they get a gravitational force that becomes exponential. It's sort of like a snowball, but the bigger it gets and the faster it gets bigger. And I think that's what we're seeing now. And I think the Rittenhouse interest in the Rittenhouse is the culmination in it. I don't think it has, because you have to figure this does not have the same interest as the Chauvin trial, because the Chauvin trial was much more about police brutality. So the interest, the audience for that was a totally different audience, and it's one that's more active in general. For Rittenhouse, I mean, we're seeing interest and involvement from people who have, generally speaking, been a very silent majority, or at the very least not vocal to begin with. But it's a momentum that's building on its own, and it's part of the broader movement that I think people are realizing they're being bamboozled by their government, and awareness is probably the best way to start fighting back.
Yeah, and it's so obvious with this one, at least in my perspective. I was somebody who did a very deep dive from day one. It was sort of kind of how I started this channel, was really taking a good look at Rittenhouse, and I did this little breakdown where I actually pulled out the audio, and you could sort of hear the gun spike and match it to a muzzle flash, and so you could easily identify that there was actually a first shooter before Rittenhouse, and that was before we knew that. And so I've been it's been so frustrating for me, this case, because it's been so obvious that this is a self-defense case. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I know what self-defense looks like, and when it's useful, and when it works in a criminal case. And it's not often. It's one of those things that oftentimes somebody wants to come in and say that they were acting out of self-defense, but the facts really don't match, and it just doesn't fit. But here, in this case, I mean, Kyle's literally running away from everybody.
Yeah. And it's like, it's the facts that they show you and the facts that they don't bother to explore in opening. Right. Zeminski, for reasons that only he can explain, fired the first shot into the air. And we're not going to call him to find out why he did that, because it's quite clear what he was intending to do was create the stampede that ensued, create the panic that leads to, they were just hoping to kill Kyle. But right. It's even worse than the people who thought they knew. And it's so bad that even the people who either were on the fence or initially thought he was guilty are coming around. And it's so bad that the media has to ignore it. And that's how you know that it's that bad. And that's how you know you got to keep the pressure on and use the open source nature of social media to get that information out there. And I just put together a video of, the mic drop moment was one moment from Grosskreitz's testimony. He had a number of other ones that the media will just never cover, because it's not just that they have to be wrong in the present, it makes them exponentially wrong in the past, and people are going to question they're going to question the honesty of the people that they trusted. And there are still some people who are naive enough to still trust these people. That's the last battle that we have to win in terms of opening the eyes of those who prefer to keep them shut.
Right. And the media has been very different in this trial than, in my opinion, than the Chauvin. And you used the words correctly. You talked about them sort of ignoring this one, and that being a good indicator of success, because they were lobbing bombs all throughout Chauvin. I mean, even the politicians were. I think even Maxine Waters was like flying in there, to come in and talk about, all the racist people there. And they've been pretty quiet. You don't even, if you go to New York Times, you go to Washington Post, it's not even on the front page of any of these places. And if this were going a different way, if Rittenhouse was shown, maybe the facts, were a little bit more in their favor, it'd be all over the place. It'd be another, white supremacy type of a narrative.
No question. I mean, it's going to ignore it. And then when the verdict comes down, they're going to pretend that they don't understand how it could have happened. So this is where the rest of us have to just, it's not even pressure. It's just, it's water to dry soil, and people are yearning for the water so that they can grow. And it's just a question, the main source is not going to be turned on anytime soon. So it's just a question of getting all those little hoses to fill in the gaps. And I think we're doing that.
Well, listen, Viva, I know I kept you way over. I know I said an hour. I really appreciate you hanging out with us. We've got a couple of days left. I think that maybe we've got tomorrow, and then if they don't rest,
it should be definitely by the end of the week, unless something goes wonky, as far as I understand.
Well, yeah, that's what the judge said. And I don't know, just speculating, I don't know who else the defense really wants to call. They got 3 witnesses out here today, probably a full day, tomorrow, and then maybe it's off to the jury and we get a verdict by Friday. I mean, that would be
the aggregate knowledge of the internet. Get the poll to the team that Rittenhouse should not be called unless they want to open a door unless they want to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I have not met anybody who has made a compelling argument as to why Rittenhouse should testify. And the most compelling argument that I've heard as to why he shouldn't is what Barnes said, is that if it will do nothing but serve to confirm whatever prejudgments or preconceived notions the jury members had. He could be the nicest guy on earth, Rittenhouse, and they'll say that means he's soulless if they think he's guilty. He can overreact. They're going to say that's a sign of bad temperament if they want to believe he's guilty. So don't give them that which will serve to confirm what they already believe. Let them rely on the rest of the evidence, which is darn good thus far.
Yeah, I agree completely. No reason to do that if they're even seriously thinking about that. Yeah, I would definitely send them that poll, because that poll seems like it's right.
It's out there on Twitter for anybody who wants to follow undumb things. I like to say on Twitter, the Viva Frei. But Robert, anytime. So like the timing works. Let's do this anytime.
All right, I really appreciate it, Viva. You are the man. I'm gonna just announce for the chat. Thank you everybody for being here. Go ahead.
vivabarneslaw.locals.com. That's where you can support both Robert Barnes and I. There's a bunch of great content out there. The channel is Viva Frei. And the only place where I have the Viva Frei is on Twitter, because some Russian account has Viva Frei, and I asked to get it, but I never got it. So you guys know where to find me. And I'll be popping in and out of Ricada tomorrow. I'll be popping out of Ricada's chat. Oh, that's it. Done. Soundbite has been clipped. I will be popping in and out of Ricada's stream tomorrow, which actually sounds even worse. I'm done, Robert.
All right. Well, no, everybody. So that's exactly what I was going to say. In the chat, I pinned it at the very top. You got Viva's YouTube channel over there. So make sure you go and subscribe over there. He's got an awesome show. Of course, he's always doing stuff with Barnes and a lot of other people. And so make sure you give him a sub over there. He's also our neighbors on Locals. So we're on Locals. He's right next door at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And they have, I mean, probably the most active community that I'm a part of on Locals. I mean, it's like out of control. I don't know how you guys do it.
It's sort of out of control. I can't respond to the DMs and the messages, and I can barely keep up. But it's an amazing community. It's like we're 70,000 members. I think it's massive. It's a great information, and people. I mean, it's better than Twitter because it has much less toxicity.
It really is amazing. I'm like mad at myself for not posting more, because I watch all the stuff that you guys post. I'm like, what a loser, Rob. Will you stop being so lazy? Well, get up and start working.
It's tough. There's only so much time in the day, and you have to keep the balance, because if you're oversaturated, then people will either take for granted or tune out. So it's a balance. But Robert, you're doing a great job, and you're doing multiple jobs. So do not beat yourself up over what you don't do well enough. Just take pride in the things you're doing fantastic on, and you're doing great.
Well, I appreciate that, Viva. You're sort of leading the way in a lot of this stuff, and we all, appreciate all the work that you're doing. You've been at the forefront of a lot of this. And so, keep up the great work. I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to I'm going to send everybody your direction. I'll let you go, Viva. And then I'm going to wrap up the show. I'll see you on the next one.
I'm out, people. Have a good night.
Bye, Viva.
Bye-bye.
All right. So that was the estimable Viva, who joined us on the channel. Now, my friends, a little bit unusual today. We're going to actually stop the show. Of course, it's Tuesday, and I've got my men's group that I meet with on a Tuesday. And so we're going to wrap up here today, right now. But we're going to come back in about an hour and a half at 7 p.m. Arizona time. Yeah, 7 p.m. Arizona time. And if you missed Rittenhouse Trial Day 7, we're going to cover the whole thing. So I've got all of the clips. We're going to do the show as regular. My technology wasn't working today, so we had to sort of split these streams up. So we're going to come back at about an hour and a half. We're going to do the full show as normal. We're going to go through all the clips, and we're going to break it down. So if you missed the Rittenhouse trial, make sure you subscribe. Come on back here in about an hour and a half. We'll go through it all again. Thanks for being here. We'll also run through some of the super chats. If you could give us a like before you hit on out of here, and I'll see you all back in 1.5 hours, my friend. See you guys. Bye-bye. Thanks again so much for being here. Love you, Viva. Don't forget to go support Viva on his channel. Hit the link that is up there on the chat or down in the description. Check him out on vivabarneslaw.locals.com, because they're right next door to us at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. All right, everybody. I'll see you back here shortly. Be well, my friends. Where is the end button? There it is. Bye.